First of all, let me thank you for coming out on this very hot July afternoon to join us for the launch of a new Asia Society report, which is focused on Pakistan police reform. First, let me begin by saying how pleased we are to be partnering with the Middle East Institute on this event, and I would like to extend thanks especially to Ambassador Chamberlain, Kate Seeley, and their staff for all the cooperation they've extended to us on this event. This event marks the release of our new report, Stabilizing Pakistan Through Police Reform. It was written by an independent commission that Asia Society convened under the leadership of Hassan Abbas. And I do understand that there have been multiple commissions within Pakistan looking at various reform issues, but I do think this is the first independent commission outside of the government that is looking at police reform, and Asia Society is very proud to be the convener of such a distinguished group of experts. At your seats, we've included a copy of our executive summary, which was written by Hassan, and that was quite a challenge because, as you see, the report is quite voluminous. But I think Hassan captured the key points and the key recommendations that the Commission put forward. Of course, we have full copies of the report. If you haven't picked one up, it's right outside the door here. And I also should say that this report is a follow-up of another report that we released a little over a year ago today called Pakistan 2020. And this effort brought together both Pakistani and American experts to look at what can and should be done over the coming decade to stabilize and bring prosperity to Pakistan. So I'd like to thank Hassan for leading these two efforts for us at Asia Society. The panel will be chaired by Ambassador Chamberlain. I don't think she needs any introduction, but you have her bio in front of you. She was, she currently is president of Middle East Institute. She previously was the Deputy High Commissioner for Refugees, and of course has had a distinguished career in U.S. Foreign Service and government, most notably as U.S. Ambassador to Pakistan in 2001, 2002, a very critical time in the relationship. So Ambassador Chamberlain will be moderating the discussion, but I do want to announce that we have a very special guest with us today who has agreed to join us and give some brief introductory remarks, and that is Ambassador Sherry Raman. Welcome, Ambassador. She is currently Pakistan's ambassador to the United States, a position she has held since November 2011. She previously served as a federal minister, ranking member of the National Security Committee in Pakistan's parliament, chair of the Jinnah Institute, a public policy think tank in Pakistan, and has had 20 years of experience as an award-winning journalist. So we're so pleased you could be here as an unexpected surprise, but thank you for taking time to be with us. So please come to the podium and we'll begin.
Well, thank you, Susan DiMaggio, Wendy Chamberlin, Hassan Abbas, Arif Alikhan, and last but certainly not least, my friend and senior colleague, Senator Aitzaz Ahsan. Welcome to Washington. And thank you all for giving me this opportunity. Thank you to Asia Society for organizing and taking this initiative. And I call it an important initiative because it's something that Pakistan has been looking at for a while, from 2002 onwards, both institutionally and even in the private sector. And I believe Hassan has already authored an earlier report that we all looked at with great interest. It certainly wasn't unexpected for me. I was asked to be here a while ago. I'm very pleased to be here, but I have to apologize in advance. I will have to leave at some point in the middle, which is very unfortunate because I do want to hear and pay my respects to all the very distinguished panelists and speakers and learn from their advocacy and advice, but also because this is a subject that is close to anyone's heart, anyone who is, any Pakistani who is committed to the project of not just stabilization of Pakistan on the whole, but really with anybody with any commitment to the rule of law. Because without an effective police force which is committed to a post-colonial model of not just enforcing its rules and regulations, but a police that is protecting not just the vulnerable population, but the citizens at large, and changing its model to one of public service. So that is extremely important for a polity such as Pakistan, where there has been immense change and urban change, and I understand that there is quite a focus, especially in this town and amongst the policy community here, on stabilizing Pakistan, and obviously that is an interest of ours and certainly is a passion. That stabilization is all about checking the advance of terrorism, militancy, and extremism. Those are all very crucial and current objectives for not just government, but anyone who is involved in public life. And for us to focus only on the military as the instrument, as the principal instrument for turning back the tide of terrorism and militancy is, I think, misplacing our hopes in not just expecting too much from one institution, but generally, history should teach us that everywhere in the world, I mean, whatever little I've been able to study on terrorism and fighting and countering terrorism effectively has always been done in concert with an effective and empowered police that is linked to the community, that understands the needs of the population, and protects population centers not in new coin terminology, but actually does it because it is from that area and it understands where it needs to go. And this is particularly germane to Pakistan today because we are a very heterogeneous landscape, if you like, not just of people, but also of terrains and ethnicities and demographies. And what a military can do effectively, for instance, in our tribal badlands, as we like to call them, in our, in the warrens of our cities, which are hugely dense urban areas, it is very difficult and almost impossible, and I would think even impractical, for a military to be trying to smoke out terrorists and criminals and militants. It's really there. That is where the job of an effective, empowered, and well-regarded police comes in. And I think we certainly have a long way to go towards that goal, but very quickly I'd like to just say that, this is an important moment for Pakistan. It is in a pivotal transition to democracy. This is the first civilian government that is completing its 5 years, and it is doing so in a peaceful transition. You may consider what goes on very often in Pakistan not a peaceful transition, but believe me, this is what we call a constitutional peaceful transition. And we are, I do appreciate the Asia Society's initiative in putting resources and bringing together so many experts on what we think is a key reform initiative that certainly merits attention and needs support. But I'd also like to take the opportunity to say that this is one of the reform initiatives that is already taking place and underway in Pakistan, and I think the report acknowledges that. And while we value incrementalism, I suppose it is seeking to bridge many gaps at one go, and that's the job of a report. And I see that it is an exhaustive and comprehensive report. I haven't had the pleasure to read all of it, but I've certainly had the chance to look at some of the things in it, and it makes important recommendations. that can really, that should go to the right places in Pakistan, and I will certainly be sending back some of the recommendations from here tonight. My officers will be staying back to take note of those. And I'd like to just end by saying that, the Pakistan police is still, it's to many people, it seems like all South Asian polices, and again, that's the post-colonial model, tend to be viewed with some level of skepticism by the local communities that they are patrolling to protect. And there's good reason often for that, but I just like to mention that it is one of the most professional, internationally regarded police forces in the world, certainly at the UN, where their services are often taken up, and they perform very well in these environments, and they've also actually shown and demonstrated their worth when they are given the kind of capacity and resources they need, when the capacity is built up. And a prime example that comes to mind and is cited everywhere in Pakistan's public sector is the highway police, the motorway police model, where when they're given the dignity of empowerment, actually, of the decisions they make are actually given credence and respected, and they're given, obviously, the salaries, the capacities, and the resources to match it. So that is a place where they have really performed well, which gives us that, light in, I would say, the middle of the tunnel, not the end. That's very far to go. So I think we need to accelerate all attention on this very important aspect of institutional government reform. This has been I know that people have worries about where Pakistan is going in terms of reform, but this has been one of the first governments that has turned the axis of democracy institutionally around. It has devolved power to the provinces fiscally and in terms of responsibility, very importantly and crucially. And I think police reform also falls in the net of those devolutions, those critical devolutionary moves that are key to how the police is viewed in the future and where it is led from. So it's not all a federal initiative and federal powered by federal purpose. And they do even fighting terrorism. They have given and rendered a high level of sacrifice, which I think doesn't get the kind of public attention it deserves. They are the front line. In most urban attacks, they are certainly the soft targets in every such situation. They are not armed to protect themselves very often in the kind of ways that military cantonments tend to protect there. But, we do have an approach now that regards the police as the way forward. And I think that fundamental shift is important. I don't think there's any dearth of prioritization in Pakistan in terms of recognizing what the police can bring to stabilizing not just the country, but in disabling terrorist networks, going after their funding, their financing. I mean, and the police gets asked to do and tasked to do, gets called upon to do any number, to meet any number of everyday and extraordinary governance challenges. I mean, just this morning I was seeing that the police in Dera Ismail Khan was asked to administer polio drops because four families were resisting the aggressive polio drive that is needed now in Pakistan to make us we are the 3 polio endemic countries in the world now. So I think that is the direction that the police is pressed towards in many directions, and we do need to empower them through many of the reforms suggested in this very important and thoughtful report. And I thank you once again for giving me the opportunity to not just read this, but to be here tonight. And I look forward to a provocative and informed debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Ambassador. Your presence here really does underscore the importance that you personally and your government assigns to police reform, and that's very important to us, and it's a very important symbol on your part. And I'd like to say that for many years I've been very much a fan of you personally and the courageous stand that you have taken in promoting the law and order in your society, particularly with the Blasphemy Act. It's come at great personal angst to you personally, but it is one that is well recognized here in the United States, and we admire you for it. Suzanne, thank you and the Asia Society for sponsoring this excellent program and event today, but also the report. It's very welcome. You can count me as a long-time admirer of the Asia Society, having spent half my career, anyway, in Southeast Asia. And the Middle East Institute is very much a proud partner in the event today. We're really in for a treat today because this panel is quite exceptional. We have three panelists who are not only expert in their field, but they're activists in their field. Dr. Hassan Abbas, an old friend of mine. He's the project director, as Suzanne mentioned. He's currently a senior advisor at the Asia Society and professor at the National Defense University. Previously, he taught at both Harvard and Columbia universities. Now, don't think that this very esteemed and impressive academic credentials means that he sits behind a computer and in front of a classroom. He's a cop, and he's served in Pakistan in police matters in two administrations for Benazir Bhutto and for President Musharraf. So he represents that rare combination of both a practical and an academic expert. Before I left Washington to go to Pakistan in 2001, I worked in the State Department on police reform. In those days, it was mostly Bosnia and Kosovo. But it was axiomatic in thinking of international police reform that the police are only one pillar in a three-legged stool, along with the judiciary and in detention. We have with us today Aitzaz Ahsan, who joins us from Pakistan, and he is widely recognized there and around the world as one of the most influential experts in Pakistan's judiciary. Aitzaz Ahsan is not new to the Middle East Institute. We honored him in 2008 for his courageous stance in leading the lawyers' movement. At that time, in 2008, was instrumental in moving Pakistan away from a military dictatorship to an elected democracy. And it's worthwhile, I think, to underscore, as Ambassador Raman did, that was a peaceful transition from a dictatorship to an elected democracy, the first time in Pakistan's history. Arif Alikhan, he is the third very impressive panelist joining us today. He has a wide-ranging experience within the U.S. government in law enforcement. For a decade, he was a federal prosecutor. He was deputy mayor for Homeland Security and Public Safety for the city of Los Angeles. He was a senior advisor to the Attorney General on cybercrime and intellectual property, as well as a professor of Homeland Security and counterterrorism at the National Defense University. Our three distinguished panelists will comment on this really excellent book. I'm sure you all have a copy. I encourage you to read it. I liked it because it very clearly identifies the problems that Pakistan faces today, analyzes the situation, but it offers recommendation. Each chapter offers recommendations. And in order to set the context for their remarks today, which I hope their remarks will be short, 10 minutes each, so that we can open it up to this very large group for another challenging, interactive conversation. Just to set the context, many contributors to this report did it from a number of different angles in Pakistan's police situation, but there were some common denominators, common threads that ran through all of the remarks. One was that Pakistan is facing a serious internal security crisis today, posed by increased terrorism, ethnic and sectarian conflict, and criminal gangs. Secondly, that police, to underscore Ambassador Raman's point, it's the police, much more than the Army, that is responsible for domestic law and order and for protecting people. And thirdly, that the institutions of law and order and police are largely failing, they're floundering. Much more needs to be done to buttress them, encourage them. Police reform is terribly important. So I don't want to speak any longer. I want to turn it over to our three speakers. First to Dr. Hassan Abbas, who will describe the report and make some comments. Thank you.
I'm thankful to the ambassador and especially Aitzaz Ahsan also, who has come from Pakistan, and Asia Society, which provided me the platform and flexibility to pick these 20 police officers, 5 or 6 of them very senior, who had served as the Inspector Generals of Police in all 4 provinces, the former head of the Federal Investigation Agency, and people with different backgrounds and different, if I may call, political groupings, although police should not be seen as that. Police should be absolutely neutral, objective, non-political. But the way things are, there are that politics involved. We were able to get people from all these different sectors. Young police officers, one of them who served in South Waziristan, who was involved in a South Waziristan operation, although police is not directly involved in that area. We have another police officer who was twice attacked by a suicide bomber. So this group with very different backgrounds, but all committed to one thing. And that's the hope which inspired me to work on this. Other than being my former cop, as rightly mentioned, this reminds me of just a one-liner anecdote. I was often asked this when I was at Harvard and Columbia and later on, so how come you transform from a cop to an academic? And my wife, who's also sitting here, Beanish, she would correct them. No, it has been a transformation from a cop to a human being. The reason being, Pakistan police has a terrible reputation. Even I had a difficulty explaining to my wife that no, the police can do good work. So thank you for allowing me, the Asia Society and other supporters, to get all these people on board. Police reforms is no rocket science. It's not that these 20, 25 people, Pakistanis and a few Americans as well, that we sat together. We were guided and inspired by a Nobel Prize winner as well in Chicago University, who helped us look at these issues from a theoretical model. So there's no rocket science. Everyone knows you need to finance police better. Everyone knows you need good training, you need good equipment, you need independence. So the larger question is also, by looking at all these problems and inadequacies, that why reform has not been taking shape the way it should have. Now is the time to look at this issue more clearly, because this is the time when Pakistan has gone through this democratic transition, as the ambassador has very rightly mentioned, as well as that transition was supported, strengthened by a very strong rule of law movement. And I would acknowledge here one of the inspirations for this work, Aitzaz Ahsan, who was the man behind the lawyers' movement, which allowed, which pushed a dictator out and allowed democracy to come back. And I think that rule of law movement has inspired not only police, but many activists and supporters. And I would also add, and it's absolutely not because she's ambassador and she happens to be here, but the fact is that Pakistan has few human rights activists who have gone out of their way to stand for people's rights, to push for reform, and ambassador has been one of them. Now to 3 major conceptual issues. One, which I want to start with, we often think about this whole idea of fixing states or making a change in the developing world. And we often think in terms of economic management, political transition, democracy. The argument or the idea behind this report, and this is not only relevant to Pakistan but to South Asia and all the developing world, that we need to change that paradigm and start looking at capacity building of those institutions which are central or foundational. Why we are saying police is such, why economic management is not that, or why any other institution is not comparable? Because police is a central part of a criminal justice system. You cannot have a modern state unless you have a functional criminal justice system. a functional criminal justice system works in a larger rule of law arena. A larger rule of law environment provides an environment for democracy to grow and establish and becomes strong. So it's not only police we are talking about. We are talking about this larger infrastructure or this larger idea. So it is important to look at that conceptual level as well. And it's relevant to many other countries as well. I am a critic of why in many cases in Afghanistan or Iraq we thought of police reforms much late in the game. Why, for instance, some cases Afghan military was given more preference, or we thought of building Afghan military rather than Afghan police. And this reminds me of a disclaimer also, that all what I am saying is not reflective or not representative of my position in terms of my academic position at NDU, or I'm not representing the US government position. This is my personal opinion. Police reforms in many of those conflict zones should have been the top priority. Now, how to go about it? And in our recommendations, other than the report, we have a 7 or 8 page summary which divides all our recommendations into 4 or 5 major areas. Institutional areas. Other areas which are legal. So I'll start with the first basic fundamental idea, that in Pakistan, unless the political and military leadership decides that for all internal security issues, civilian law enforcement will be the prime institution, unless that priority or that national agenda is set, we'll have difficulty. Not that other institutions, military, paramilitary forces were not doing important job. I think they were doing a very important job. They have given so many sacrifices. But it is primarily a law enforcement model that is required in Pakistan. You just declare one group or one individual or one small gang as a terrorist group. You send out military or paramilitary forces, like it was done in FATA, the federally administered tribal areas. If, I'm arguing, there would have been a law enforcement model, that would have meant the police will look at the person, develop its profile, will take the case to court, let the judge decide whether you want to go after someone. In Pakistan, there has been a trend recently in some provinces that for extrajudicial killings, frankly, even coming from some important political leaders in provinces saying, we will get rid of these because in courts we are not getting convictions. Well, the real answer is to reform not only the police model or law enforcement model, but the criminal justice system. And the major lacuna there is a witness protection system. I mentioned this yesterday in our launch at New York as well, and it's worth repeating. In 3 or 4 major cases, those judges who gave judgments against major terrorists in Pakistan or against some human rights violators, they gave judgments, but they gave judgments after signing a conditional document, which said, you have to take us out to London or to US. And I mentioned there are 2 judges who gave very important, brave judgments, but now they're living in New York because they knew if they stay there, they'll be killed. But the problem was there were not enough witnesses who saw all those murders and crimes, who were able to come because state was not able to provide them the security. Something which is very, very basic. It will not take millions of dollars. It will take some internal reform and a priority. These ideas, again, I'm saying, are not very difficult to come up with. It is just that at a national level, that priority has to come. There are signs. Absolutely, there are signs, but much has to be done. The second idea, which again, I'm not going into all the details which are explained in very extensive fashion in the report, but another simple reform idea. The idea to develop a secret service. The word secret can become controversial in Pakistan, but let's say we are saying use secret service. Why? Most of the time, police officers who were interviewed in Pakistan in my 6 trips for this visit, about 60 police officers that I was able to interview, junior and senior, they said, sir, 50% of the time we are on the roads or in some important place because a VIP, a very important person, or VVIP is passing through. So police, rather than doing its basic policing work, is providing security to all the other services. In US, this has been in some other countries as well. This has been streamlined. It's simple. Have a special, separate institution which is responsible for providing security to the president, prime minister, chief ministers, top judges, even the chief of the army staff and others, so that everyone knows, even the military should know. Local law enforcement, local security should not come from their special services commandos, who are pride of Pakistan, but it is the responsibility of the police to provide. Unless that decision is made, unless resources are diverted in that fashion, and we are not saying this is the ultimate answer, but this is one thing that we have learned. Other than the US model, there's a lot to learn from Turkey. Turkey has transformed its police in recent years. I went to their police academies, and they did it in 5 years. One of the major reasons they were able to do it because of the democratic transition, because new elected leadership decided this is the priority. In Indonesia, they were able to do some very important and effective counterterrorism because they developed a counterterrorism center or counterterrorism whole group within the police, which started working on de-radicalization. You cannot go and kill all the terrorists or whomsoever you declare terrorists in Karachi or Balochistan or elsewhere, or religious extremists. No, this is, again, you have to de-radicalize, bring some people into the mainstream. That's not the main purpose of work of police, but police can play a role. Police should be involved in that. I'll close with by saying that the one criticism can come that, yes, we know this, you yourself said these are all common sense ideas, but what is the main obstacle? I would argue, one, that there is a lot of hope. As the ambassador had rightly said and was mentioned earlier, motorway police is a successful model. In case of UN, Pakistan is the 5th largest contributor to United Nations. And one of the senior officials in the UN peacekeeping operations, he has written a piece for us in this report, and he mentions that Pakistani police actually is rated very highly. So why the police officers who are doing great job in UN, all across the world, in conflict zones, when they go back, there's a problem? Because of service structure, because of salaries. From just a last one-line anecdote, I had served as the assistant superintendent of police in Sawabi and Mardan, and I remember this was in '97. On the very second or third day, I was told that police is only provided expenses for gas and other central job of police. They're only provided funds for first 10 days. I said, what do you do in the next 20 days? Sir, we do fundraising. I said, what kind of fundraising? The fundraising is corruption. So how can you stop them? That's just at the time when you'll raise funds for 20 days, that's it. So those kind of things are very basic. Unless salaries are increased, unless there is a priority, things will not improve. There are signs of hope. People really want to change. From the US side, if I may say with all the respect for the Kerry Lugar Bill and other great efforts here, that this realization that the Pakistani development side of things and Pakistani law enforcement also needs support, this came a bit late in the game. However, I must acknowledge there were about 17, and those 17 police officers who I am about to quote their statement just to close, 17 of them said, they gave a statement which came across to me as something very supportive or friendly towards US, and I said, so you are saying it in just in closed doors, or you want me to quote you? They said, no, we want to quote you. And the quote was, they said, when we asked them, can US help? They said, yes. The ECTAP program it's a small project, and INL's work, they all said, is doing very important contribution. It is at a very small scale, maybe $100 million. I'm not saying necessarily US has to cut checks and that's how Pakistani police will change. I'm saying there are agents of change within the police and within Pakistan who need support. And that is the US support from INL, from State Department and ECTAP that is being recognized. That support comes for training and equipment. That's what we need to strengthen, and I'll close there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Arif?
Thank you, Ambassador Chamberlain. Thank you, Dr. Abbas and the Asia Society and Middle East Institute for inviting me here. I recently left Washington, D.C. about 9 months ago to move to Los Angeles, where I grew up. And it's always wonderful to go from 75-degree weather with no humidity to Washington, D.C., so I appreciate that. As Ambassador Raman had mentioned, and as you'll see from both Dr. Abbas's talk and also as you'll hear from Senator Hassan, the theme of the rule of law and the importance of the rule of law for the legitimacy of any government. I think that when you think about the rule of law, you must also think about that those laws must be democratically created to have the legitimacy. and most importantly, that the rule of law is effective only when there is a fair and just enforcement of that law. And the local police, the police forces, are the primary instrument in enforcing the law. And if the police are not legitimate, it is very difficult for a government to be seen and perceived as legitimate in the eyes of the people they are supposed to represent. I've been fortunate in my lifetime, having been raised in the United States, educated here, and worked here in a variety of law enforcement positions at both the local and the federal level, to have seen some of the best law enforcement officers and organizations in the world, and also seen many of the challenges they faced in the evolution of their approaches as well. Although my mother is from Pakistan, I am not, but I feel that my small contribution to this important effort can maybe give some perspective that many of us who are here in the United States can see that would give us optimism about what reforms are possible in Pakistan. I should also make the disclaimer, since I still do work for now the city government of Los Angeles, that I'm just expressing my own opinions, and they do not reflect any of the many agencies I've worked for in the last 15 years. And if I do say something controversial or it upsets you, please attribute it to Dr. Abbas and blame him. See, he is a human being, you know. I won't belabor you with the details of what I wrote in my contribution, but I do think that a short overview is important to understand the context in which the United States and its experience is relevant to what we all seek to do in Pakistan. If you look at the United States over the past century and a half, there has been significant reform in the way policing has been administered in a very large and diverse country. Back before the turn of the 20th century is what I call the political era of policing, where policing was actually politics. Police officers were selected based on patronage and political appointments. They were seen as the direct enforcement arm of the political bosses and those who were in control. They were not seen as public servants there to support the entire community, but only those who were the elite. And they were often involved in electioneering and intimidation and actually encouraging people to vote during elections. Since I am from Los Angeles and I was deputy mayor for public safety in Los Angeles, I usually try to make references to TV shows and movies. So the best way to characterize the political era is, for those of you familiar with movies such as The Changeling or LA Confidential, where the policing was seen as very enmeshed in the corruption that was going on in the local government. And that was unfortunate, but you saw an evolution of that as there was an emphasis on reforming local governments and the political bosses, especially in large cities like Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago, that the police were also evolving as well, moving into the next era, which is what I and many others call the professional era, which was an effort to take policing away as a job, a low-paying job that encouraged corruption in a very, very close relationship with the community, and often those in the community that could help them promote and create some distance between that, but also professionalizing the police as a special type of almost scientific effort to solve and prevent crimes. The FBI is a good example of what J. Edgar Hoover did in trying to promote the Federal Bureau of Investigation as experts in forensics, whether it was fingerprinting or handwriting analysis or matching fibers, different things like that. Very professional organization, always wearing a suit, clean cut, and actually promoted that quite a bit through the media, through various television shows, etc. You also saw that in local policing, and the best example of that was the Los Angeles Police Department during the 1950s, when after going through an era of very bad corruption, William Parker was appointed as the police chief, who came in and essentially militarized the Los Angeles Police Department, taking them away from being very close to the community and creating a paramilitary organization that very clean-cut, straight-laced, marching, and very much resembled a military force. The effect of that, though, and I'll just back to my television references, the classics are Adam 12, for those of you old enough to remember that, with two police officers who never smile and drive around their police car, and then Dragnet, of course, which was Joe Friday, the detective who would always come in and say, "Just the facts, ma'am." That actually was the ethos of the Los Angeles Police Department that lasted for many, many years. They developed the special weapons and tactic teams. They became experts in how to deploy police officers in a large area using police cars and radios and a lot of advanced technology. The downside to that, though, was they had such a distance from the community that they often lacked the support of the community, especially those in minority communities in Los Angeles and other cities that also applied this model. Even though at that time, especially after the 1968 convention, Democratic Convention in Chicago, when there was a large riot outside and the Chicago Police Department, I think it's pretty clear, overreacted to that, there was an emphasis by the federal government to educate police officers and professionalize it even more, which over the decades I think has made a big difference, but at the time did not. But the pendulum has swung to very, very tight relationships with the community that bred corruption, all the way to a very significant distance between the police and the community. And then what you had was an us versus them mentality. And when police officers would go into communities and try to deal with crime, they were seen as an occupying force. It would create a lot of tension, especially in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement, and erupted in quite a bit of violence and reaction to the police. That even went out in Los Angeles to 1992 during the riots after the Rodney King verdict, which was really a turning point in Los Angeles about the way they were doing policing. And then emerged what I think is the current era, which is the community-oriented policing model, which is the idea of being closer to the community, working together to solve problems, being much more understanding, listening, and collaboratively trying to deal with local problems, whether it's graffiti on the walls, prostitution, or violent crime, but also keeping a distance that's sufficient to make sure that you're not encouraging a corrupt or undue influence in those relationships. Now, of course, part of that, too, is a structure that promotes merit and adequate pay and internal affairs to make sure that officers are in line. But and I couldn't think of a movie or a television show that represented that, but maybe next time. But that's the era we're in. Now, there are a lot of police departments out there who say they do community policing. It is sort of the mantra that you will hear, but not all of them do it well. And it's something that I think all police and law enforcement have to evolve to. So why does any of this matter to the issue of police reform in Pakistan? Pakistan is obviously a very different country, different demographics, different history, different economic situation. Well, I think it does apply because when you look at the evolution of policing in the United States, there is reason for optimism. Reform is difficult in any setting, especially when you're talking about power that is entrenched with people who have it. People do not want to give up power or jurisdiction, etc. And that was also seen in the police reforms in the United States. But it happened. Even though the complexity of that challenge was pretty enormous. When you think about the number of police officers we have in the United States, which is almost 700,000 in 18,000 different agencies, that doesn't count the 100,000 additional federal law enforcement officers in over 60 different agencies. That is a very complex network of law enforcement officers responsible for a wide variety of things. Just a quick example, when I was Deputy Mayor of Homeland Security and Public Safety in the City of Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles has 4 police departments. The Los Angeles Police Department, the Los Angeles Port Police for the Seaport, the Los Angeles Airport Police, where I now oversee, and the General Services Police. Now, that's not all the police departments in the 475 square miles of Los Angeles. There's still the California Highway Patrol, the LA Sheriff's Department, the LA Community College Police, the University of California Police, the LA Unified School District Police, and all the federal agencies. That's in one city. So I only say that because when you think of the complexity of trying to evolve policing in that wide array and network, it was a daunting challenge, but it does give hope that it can happen. And hopefully it can happen faster than, in many ways, the way it took in the United States. Secondly, the key point is that you need to have structural change. It can't simply be an idea that you want to do it, it's the right thing to do, etc. Structural change is critical. And I mentioned in community-oriented policing that every police department you talk to will say, well, we use community-oriented policing. Chances are they haven't made the structural changes to actually do it. And that was the difference in the Los Angeles Police Department that really was implemented over the last 8 to 9 years was that the police department changed its structure, created incentives for those officers to actually get promoted, to be paid more for developing those positive contacts with the community and collaboratively solving problems. And if you don't make those structural changes, you will never be able to execute that strategy. And the final reason that I think we can take from this, and why I think there is some optimism, is that contrary to popular belief, police officers are people, even though sometimes they seem somewhat robotic. But because we're dealing with people, I always, maybe I'm a bit of an idealist, and it's very easy to be a cynic about this, but people are police. Police officers are people. The victims are people. The community consists of people. Even the politicians are people. But what that means is everybody at its core, everybody wants to live in a safe and secure community. And if the will is there, if the structures are there, and if the ideas are there, and I think they are plentiful, there are many good ideas in here, but many of these ideas reflect what already exists in Pakistan and many other countries. But it's that will of the people and the focus on that that I think gives me at least the optimism that we can do this. Because reform is constant and continuous. Yesterday, you may have seen the U.S. Department of Justice just came up with a settlement agreement with the New Orleans Police Department for a consent decree. It's a reflection that even in the United States, in many departments, there's still a long way to go. And that continuous momentum is only going to be sustained by the people who live in that country and those who lead them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ambassador Chamberlain, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to be here. I'm grateful to the ambassador and to the Asia Society for enabling me to be a part of this project, although I was really at the fringes in the sense that I've contributed not any of the substantial and substantive reports, but only the preface to this volume. But I feel privileged to have been associated with it. Why should a gathering of such distinction in what might be styled as the world's capital be interested in police reforms, or any reforms for that matter, in a place as distant and far away as Pakistan? You might ask that question of yourselves. Why should the world be bothered about Pakistan and what we are thinking of doing about our police, what structures we want to introduce, what are the issues that are involved in police reforms that have been raised in this report, like political interference, career advancement, structures of the police itself, judicial oversight and judicial processes, the rate of convictions, the rate of arrests, the crime rate, intelligence, interrogation, all that. Why should people in the United States be interested in what is happening in Pakistan? First, I think it's because Pakistan is the theater of a global war. It's truly an international war with international implications, and America itself is deeply, deeply, deeply involved in that war. It's invested trillions and many lives, and it has invested its very reputation in that war itself. That is one reason why the Americans should be interested in what is happening in Pakistan. Although we do not seek the Americans to guide us or to interfere in our politics and our systems, but we certainly would want the Americans not to be on the wrong side of the conflict that is taking place both inside Pakistan in terms not only of the weapons that are being used, but in terms of the mindsets that are in conflict in that war and in that theater. The second issue is one of responsibility. I think that the Americans should be made more conscious of. Pakistan was the frontline state against America's war against the Soviet Union. Many would even speculate that the Berlin Wall fell because of the defeat of the Soviet Union's armies in Afghanistan. And that was by the effort primarily that Pakistan put into that war. Now at that time, the jihadis, and we are blamed for support of jihad now of the jihadis. We are blamed of going soft on the Al-Qaeda or on the Taliban, even though Pakistani military has lost more men in the battlefields in Pakistan than the NATO forces troops have lost in Afghanistan. Not that we want your boys to die, but we want you to recognize our contribution to that war. After the Soviet Union was defeated, and after the Soviet Union disappeared from the map of the earth, America just wiped its hands clean and left us. You cannot walk a dog in DC. You cannot walk a dog, such a beautiful, such a clean city. You cannot walk a dog in the streets of the District of Columbia without a bag, a plastic bag or a cellophane bag and a polythene glove, because you're required to pick up the droppings that the dog drops from time to time to relieve itself. And you left mountains of dog droppings on the borderlands between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And you did not bother, you did not look back. So the second issue is one of responsibility. The first is one of an international conflict in which both you and we are concerned in our own ways, in our maybe perhaps different ways. We may have perhaps slightly different perspectives, but the objective is the same. We want the Pakistanis to live safe and prosperous, peaceful lives, and to prosper and to grow. And I'm sure you want that too, because Pakistan has been an ally of the United States through long years against communism in the Cold War and then in Afghanistan, and now it's an ally in this war against the Al-Qaeda. So it is important, the report that has been put before you and what it proposes should interest people in Washington. What the report effectively says, and it comes out with important suggestions. This is a report by senior police officers who've served long years and productive careers, the best years of their lives in the police, in the uniform. They know the lay of the land, they know the problems. But I have a slightly different perspective. And my perspective is that of the politician, and a politician who tries to take a historical perspective of things. I think there are three foundational reasons and realities that must be taken into account before any reform can be practiced and implemented in Pakistan, or in South Asia for that matter, but particularly Pakistan. The first is societal. It's a question of attitudes. The second is structural. And the third has to do with the history of technology and the advancement of technology. The first I said is societal. There is a loss in Pakistan, as Hassan, who's been a senior and a very perceptive police officer in the police service of Pakistan. And he was, I can testify to the fact, a human being at that time also when he was wearing a uniform. The first is a societal attitude that the police officer who is admired is the one who can bend rules for a friend. Because the quotient of power, the measure of authority and the measure of power in Pakistan, alas, is the ability to abuse the power and the willingness to abuse that power. If you can't abuse the power, if you're not a yaron ka yar, which means a friend of friends, and out to help a friend regardless of the crime he may be accused of, you're not admired, you're not respected, you're considered a weak police officer. So that societal attitude is the first challenge to police reform of any kind, of any variety in that country and in that region, in large parts of that region. The second is the structural issue. The structural issue, by structural issue I don't mean what Arif was referring to and rightly and very competently referring to, of the structure of the police system and police establishment itself. I'm referring to a cross-societal structure, a structure in which there is an imbalance between the civil and civic society and politician on the one hand, and the civil and military bureaucracy on the other. Historically, unfortunately and alas, as those interested in South Asia in particular would know, in 1857, the British finally conquered decisively all of India. That meant all of India and all of Pakistan, all of India and all of Indus regions. Then they set up and enlarged the network of bureaucracy in the military. The purpose of the bureaucracy, the civil and military bureaucracy, as that of any imperial power, was basically to draw out raw material and raw produce from the colony, take it to Lancashire and Manchester and Sheffield, manufacture, add value to the raw produce, and return it to the colonies as produced goods, as manufactured goods, and sell them at captive monopoly prices. So there was a two-way advantage being taken by the imperial authority and power and the imperial corporations like the East India Company in this trade. It was a one-sided trade both ways. Now, this required a strong civil bureaucracy, a strong police, and a strong military. As far as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan was the largest producer of sugar in South Asia. Pakistan, even pre-partition I'm talking, the areas under Pakistan are the largest producers of sugar, raw sugar, largest producer of textile cotton, and it had only one textile mill and one sugar mill at the time of independence in 1947. It was kept under-industrialized. India, on the other hand, was industrialized somewhat more vigorously because of the fact that the First World War in particular broke down sea lanes, threatened sea lanes, and a second industrial base was required. So India developed a bourgeoisie which began to compete for the trade that was in imperial monopoly beforehand. So the Indians had a bourgeoisie in 1947 which brought in reforms and brought in the dominance of the democratic and political structures which Pakistan lacked. Pakistan lacked a genuine bourgeoisie, nationalist bourgeoisie, and that lack left us far behind. And I think all police reforms will falter unless we realize this also. And the third and the last is technology. We are aware that in history, technology has always determined the victor. When the bow and arrow were devised, the armies equipped with bows and arrows, they prevailed over armies equipped with spears and swords, because you could fire off the bow and an arrow from a distance. The horse prevailed over the bullock as a vehicle of cavalry. The machine gun prevailed over the ordinary bazooka or the gun or the Enfield rifles, because it could give a burst and that would not miss, until the armored tank was devised to counter the machine gun. The aircraft prevailed until the anti-aircraft guns were. The missile systems have their counters in the anti-missile systems like the Patriot systems. Now a new weapon has entered the field, and that weapon is technologically unique so far in history, and that is the human bomb, the suicide bomber. You can't tell the victim from the weapon. You can't tell between them. And the weapon has the facility, because it looks equally like the victim, to penetrate into the densest and the deepest into the densest areas of population or gatherings or crowds. And since the police in Pakistan and the law enforcing agencies are the primary targets of the suicide bomber, we need technology to develop to counter the suicide bomber. Now there is one solution that Israel had of constructing a wall, but we have the suicide bombers being spawned by dense cities and densely populated areas where madrasas may be located or other such motivational centers may be located. That brings us to the last point that I would like to make, and it brings me back to the report. And that is, we have to find means of countering the suicide bomber by denying him the environment which creates the mindset which enables or persuades a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old to blow himself up and think that he is doing the right thing in doing so. He is determined to blow himself up. And for that, we need rule of law. We need a justice system. We need a system in which there is a far reduced disparity in social and economic conditions of different classes. And for that we need, of course, police reform. So I strongly recommend this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Three excellent but very different presentations. I think all of them call for law, the rule of law, and police reform. But how do you get there? I'm going to ask one question before we open it up to the public. How do you get to that political will that allocates the resources, that makes the changes in the bureaucracy, that provides the incentives, the salary incentives, the training, that begins to build a police force in balance with a very well-endowed military in Pakistan? I know there have been efforts in the past. In 2002, the police reform started out well. I mean, it's a model of police reform, but then it was abandoned in 2004 when it hit the wall of some political competition. How do you instill that political will within Pakistan?
I think two things come to my mind. First, the democratic transition has to complete. Because what we had seen in 1990s, and Aitzaz can also tell us more, he was the interior minister at that time with the first government of Benazir Bhutto. They got stuck with this internal political rivalries to an extent that it was a matter of who will survive. In the 1990s, each political government in Pakistan had hardly 2 years on average. And they were trying to survive. From one side, political opponents, from other side, potential military takeover. So one is the democratic transition has to complete. Then politicians will have more opportunity, more chances. That's one way. And maybe if the cycle continues effectively, not to be pushed by the military dictators or by the Pakistani intelligence or by someone else, if that is a natural phenomena, automatically people start, because people in Pakistan, 180 million, are going through a terrible phase. I have been told, you'll hear from anyone in Lahore, Islamabad, Karachi, people send their kids to school not knowing whether they'll return. People want that security. If any political government will not deliver, you'll have a new government. I think there are many changes happening in Pakistan's political scene as we talk about. Imran Khan, may not be a supporter of his party. I'm not a supporter of any political party other than having some disclaimer, some sympathies for People's Party, being a progressive party. But Imran Khan is getting a lot of support in Pakistan today because he's saying in his manifesto, we'll first do, or in a massive way, do political reform, police reform. So people probably will also look at him in that way. Other than the democratic transition, I think it must be acknowledged that we should be careful not to frame this whole issue as police versus the military. Because military may think they are recipients of big aid for counterterrorism. That aid in our suggestion, and this many police officers, including a serving army officer who has written an article after his due permissions, has also recommended get the police more funds. I had a chance to talk to the Pakistani intelligence chief who said we have no issue. Don't expect us to go and fight the militants in the South Punjab. It is the job of Pakistani police. I said, will you support it? Will you have any issues? He said, no, we will. So there are those issues. It is not a military versus police. But military also has to realize that if they are getting a major chunk of funds, it takes away money from very important other works. That realization, and I think we have smart people in Pakistani military as well at the senior levels who will start thinking on these lines, rather than thinking that, okay, politicians are failing, it's time for us to take over. No one from outside should even think about suggesting, recommending, or thinking about it. I think these two parallel things will create an opportunity for politicians to have a space so that they'll think about more effective ways to support police reform.
Quite frankly, Wendy, that's a very pertinent question, of course, and it should be your concern, but not your job. That is for the Pakistanis to bring about themselves. I think what is important to remember about the Pakistanis, and I don't want to get into an argument with Hassan on Imran Khan's vision of a justice system. It is pretty rustic and rudimentary to me, somewhat medieval, quick justice, on-the-spot justice, but I'm not commenting on that. But I think what has to be remembered is that Pakistan is not the Taliban. The picture of a Pakistani, mostly photographs that are published in the West about Pakistan are of Taliban. Somehow they have come to characterize Pakistan more in the Western mind than, say, the lawyers' movement, the justice movement, say the parliament, say our judges themselves. The Talib mentality is the marginal fringe, the slightest, slimmest marginal fringe. It may be more dramatic in what it is able to achieve, and with dramatics and more gory achievements, but it is the outside marginal fringe of Pakistani society, which is vibrant, which wants democracy, which is a country that has resisted and come out against every military dictator. Every military dictator has faced popular movements. There have been military dictators foisted upon us by friends at home and abroad. But nevertheless, the people of Pakistan have always come out against the military dictators. They have been against arbitrariness. They are for due process. They are for the rule of law. As I speak now, there must be 100 lawyers in Pakistan, at least 100 lawyers in Pakistan, who are studying and reading some case to quote tomorrow, or maybe quoting standing on their feet because of the number of hours difference that we have. As I speak now, in the several courts in Pakistan, in the hundreds of courts of Pakistan, at least 100 lawyers who must be quoting from some American precedent, from Marbury versus Madison to the healthcare judgment of Justice Roberts. These judgments are not binding on Pakistani courts, but they are persuasive. The British House of Lords is frequently quoted and followed. The Indian Supreme Court is frequently quoted and followed. We have a justice system that is like yours. We have a value system that is like yours. We have an urge for democracy like you people have. We have an urge for rule of law and civil society, and for a plurality of thoughts and plurality of ideas like you have and you encourage. And that is what is really Pakistan. And I think the right reforms will be brought in as long as arbitrariness and military power is not supported by the West in Pakistan as it has been done in the past.
Okay, we're going to open up for questions. Let's start from the back and we'll work up towards the front. We've got 15 minutes left. I see an arm. The white shirt. Please, if you could share your name and affiliation and only speak in the mic. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Nasher Sukhera from NYU. So there's been a lot of talk about police recommendations, and I've seen police recommendations from police officers in Pakistan, their written papers in Staff College and NEPA. But the thing is that they fail to be implemented. And one of the reasons that Professor Hassan Abbas said was that there isn't a political will or the military will. But why do the reforms fail internally? Because such as if you're aware of the computerization of police stations, that is an internal reform. So why do they fail? Why do not the internal reforms of the police go through if the external reforms are not ready at this moment?
Good question.
Thank you.
A very important question. I think, yes, the previous reform efforts have been failing, but there has been a constant desire also to change. For instance, we have counted more than 30 different commissions which are set up to think about this. One of the reasons, I can't go into many details, but there are two chapters in the book, one in the report, one by Tariq Khosa, a legendary Pakistani police officer, who talks about the obstacles. Shoaib Sadl, another leading Pakistani police officer, now retired, and who's a tax-ombudsman, who has written this piece. I encourage you to read that. But one of the reasons is, in Pakistan, it is... police structure is hierarchical. There's this elitist police, which is Police Service of Pakistan. I once was, of course, a member of that since the British times, who joined directly at the level of top supervisory officers. In Britain, in US, correct me, Arif, if that's the case, but in many other Western countries, even if you have to be a chief of police someday, you start from below. So there's this divisions within police, and those who are in strong position in terms of power, as Aitzaz has said, that culture exists. They have not been allowing that police reform to take place. To give credit where due, in 2002, General Pervez Musharraf, who I'm all-time critic of, but he had supported and he had called for a strong police reform effort. In 2002, a document came in. He couldn't sustain it, because the politicians who were with him couldn't sustain that power will go out of their hands. But police had played a very important role. Internal effort was there in 2002 to implement that. Even now, we are also suggesting the political government, somehow or the other, is not very fond of, the new political government is not fond of this reform effort 2002. But within police, it is a widely held view that will work. So there is a much more debate within police also today, which was not the case previously. I think this is what has changed recently.
May I just say one thing, one sentence on that? Hassan said that Musharraf introduced the 2002 police reform, police order 2002, which undoubtedly, in my estimation also, and without reservations, was a progressive move from 100 years history of imperial police structures. But where I disagree with him is when he says it was not fully implemented because the politicians did not want him to implement him. He was a military dictator. He could have implemented it himself. He was not beholden to any politician for his power or his authority. The fact that he did not implement the police reforms is because of the structure of the police. The imperial police is the one that is the preferred structure of the state and the ruling elite, including the military in Pakistan.
Okay, well, let me just have a follow-up question then, Aitzaz. Now we have a democratically elected government who favor some of the very structural reforms that were in the 2002 proposals. Why isn't the current government going back and picking up and implementing some of these reforms?
Alas, that is because anything that Musharraf touched became, as far as politicians are concerned, by a common consensus, became dirt and mud. So anything that has the stamp of Musharraf has to be avoided. Unfortunately, it's the wrong reason. But that is the only reason why the police order is not being brought back. But the police order was a good reform, was a progressive reform, a progressive system, and I say that despite my opposition to Musharraf. But the fact is that whenever you try to persuade any of the political parties, they say they shun it and they try to avoid touching it because they say, oh, that's Musharraf's reform.
It's an honest answer. Thank you very much. Now we're going to come up 25% down the aisle. Okay, right there.
Hi, my name is Anwar, and I'm a Fulbright scholar from Pakistan and a graduate student at Duke University. I'll be quoting Steven Pinker, who says that the reason why people would not commit crimes is not because they're deterred by stronger punishments or by the fact that they will be caught, but because they feel that there's an equal probability of everyone being punished if and when they get caught, which means that the judicial system has to function in its entirety for law enforcement to take place. Now, considering that our judiciary is more concerned with the price of samosas, and those of you who don't know what samosas are, they're dumplings, has there actually been any focus on how to reform the district and civil courts of Pakistan that actually take up cases that people are encountered with?
Quite frankly, that's not within the ambit of today's agenda, but I'll try to give. I could dilate on that for several hours if you wish, but since it's not within the terms of today's discussion, judicial reform is not, police reform is, I may only mention one thing, that after the reinstatement, the Chief Justice of Pakistan, Iftikhar Muhammad Chaudhry, brought in what was described as the new judicial policy. He was reinstated the last and the second time for his current term in March 2009, and by late 2009 he brought in the new judicial policy, which is being currently followed, which is not being sort of implemented in the manner it should be, but it is something that is a document that you must read, and we must discuss it some other time. But there is a new judicial policy.
Okay, halfway down the aisle, the guy with the white hair.
My name is Samar Chatterjee. Just a curious question. The gentleman from Mr. Arif, you trace the history of up to the human bomb, and I'm wondering the Obama drone bomb, what it is doing to police reform or justice in Pakistan.
I didn't give the history up to the bomb. I could do that after, if you'd like. So I'm not entirely sure what your question is.
Well, I think you really wanted to address me, although you mentioned Mr. Arif. All start from Abbas, Arif, and Hassan in this panel. But no, I think we are very clear in Pakistan about the drones and drone attacks. They penetrate and violate the sovereignty of the country, and they also cause collateral damage, which causes a further exacerbation and exaggeration of the mindset that turns against the establishment and turns against which also feeds on and fans a lot of anti-Americanism in Pakistan, which is counterproductive in the war against terror.
Okay, towards the front of the room, Dr. Nazar.
Thank you very much. I am Dr. Nisar Chaudhry with Pakistan American League. And Wendy, thank you very much. It was a very enlightening, this distinguished panelists, all the 3As, AAA, this group of AAA, they did very well. And I will also echo the feeling of Aitzaz when he mentioned about our friend, he used the word which has no relevance to our friend Naeem, because he twice mentioned that ambassador is right. He should know that the ambassador is always right. So I wanted to make it clear to him. The other day I was at Foreign Service Institute to give a lecture on Pakistan about crisis in Pakistan. And I was arguing with our coordinator that you did not specify, are you talking of the crisis of the past, present, or the future? Because the country is being marinated in crisis. And this effort, this commission has done a wonderful effort. But my concern is, nothing has so far worked in Pakistan. There is hardly an institution which doesn't need reforms. And nobody has mentioned about the character, commitment, and the culture of the society, their thought process, which has to ask for these things. because Hassan Abbas did not leave Pakistan because they did not bring reforms in police. He left Pakistan because of the Darbari culture in Pakistan. He rejected that culture and he walked away from that culture. So my question is, how do you expect that this report would be implemented? Because in Pakistan, everything has become politics.
Okay. How do we expect it to be implemented?
I think the models are there. As I had mentioned, CPLC, Citizen Police Liaison Committee in Karachi, because the private investors realized that they need to have a stake in it. And because in Karachi they're industrialists, the literacy rate is a bit higher, that effort worked. Motorway police, just because they provided better salaries, better health care, one can argue in motorway police they are not facing those political questions. The politicians don't need them for any manipulation. There's no militants perhaps who are operating in that area, though they cross through that motorway certainly. But motorway police got better results because they are provided better facilities. So to me, that the answer is very simple. To me, the answer to drone question is also very simple. I would like that money in drones, and drones are very, very expensive. With that money, I bet you can reform the whole police structure in Pakistan. We had done a study, just one figure, with one F-16 fighter aircraft, you can build 76 police stations in Pakistan. So that's the options. That's the option of the recipient, as well as, I may dare say, the donor. That has to change from various angles.
Okay, wait a minute. We've got one more question. I see a lot of very eager hands, and I apologize to you guys, but we haven't had a woman yet. So let's have Ms. Aziz right here as our last question. I apologize. Perhaps the panelists will stay a few minutes afterwards, and you can ask some questions.
Thank you very much. My name is Donia Aziz. I'm a member of the lower house in Pakistan's parliament. My question is, Mr. Abbas, it's very interesting what you've presented. And I'd like to know, in the context of Pakistani society as it stands today, the hyper-vigilantism that we see today, instances where 3 young boys are lynched publicly in the presence of police, other instances where accused blasphemers are publicly stoned or killed in the presence of police. How can we help or support or expect the police to reform in these kinds of circumstances? And also, we don't see any self-disciplinary actions from within the police. And one just small point I'd like, and Aitzaz Saab is not just an eminent barrister, but an uncle too. I'd like to repeat the question Ambassador Chamberlain asked. Why aren't the police reforms being implemented? Because it's not everything that Musharraf touched was turned to dust, as we see with the NRO. So if we like the NRO, why don't we like the police reform?
Thank you.
Very briefly, one, your points are very valid. Yes, police stood by when those terrible crimes were happening. Yes, police has not been able to provide even the basic security because there's lack of that dedication, professionalism, competence, resources. However, one of the problems in Pakistan, some developing countries is police is expected to do everything. If there's a protest, because there's electricity shutdowns, police is asked to go there and manage it. During Musharraf era, if the posters, the banners had to be put on the streets for political party that he was supporting, police had to do that. Police is, because it's the representative of a state in uniform, it's visible. There's as much corruption in Pakistan among, if I may say, among whether the politicians, whether on the intelligence side, or custom service, income tax, police. I'm not defending police, but I'm saying police is more visible. For vigilantism and those issues related to religious extremism, something of course has terribly gone wrong. The degeneration of religious political thought, the manipulation of religion, the commercialization of jihad. These are terrible things. Police has not created those. Again, police is part of the solution here. But the larger problems, I absolutely agree that religious discourse, the way it has gone in a terrible direction, that can only be treated with education. So though there are different solutions, but when it comes to police, we are saying, yes, it's one area. The real question is where to start that larger reform. So we are saying, yes, transition to democracy is one positive sign. police reform, justice reform will be next step, and then we'll go. Then the people's representative will decide that we don't need another F-16. We need more schools.
Well, actually, Donia's question I tried to address in my main submissions. If you will recall, I had said that there is a societal value system and normative pattern in Pakistan in which, first of all, there is the norm that the quotient, the measure of authority is the ability to and willingness to abuse that authority. And this is not just in the police. This, as Hassan said, is in the custom. It's not just corruption. It's not just corruption. It's lionized more in Indian films, in the Bollywood films. This particular value and norm is lionized and heroized in Salman Khan's films and the other heroes of Bollywood screen. The second thing I had already said is that the structures of society are such that we have a civil and military bureaucracy that actually leads and that has led throughout for the last 150 years in Pakistan the feudalized politics of Pakistan. And there's been no real growth of a national bourgeoisie which would want democratic institutions. The lawyers' movement was a demonstration of the middle class coming out behind the lawyers. But the lawyers can't lead it all along. They have their profession to go back to. For 4 years they were on the streets is more than it has happened in anywhere else in the country. I think we will have to change mindsets. We will have to change before we change the structures, we have to change the discourse altogether. And Donia, as a parliamentarian and a pretty vocal parliamentarian, you can contribute to it as much as I can, and we should both promise to do so.
Okay. Last 30 seconds, go to Hassan.
One, I really want to thank Middle East Institute and Asia Society, and especially 2 or 3 people who worked with us. Suzanne has been very helpful, the Vice President of the Asia Society, who introduced the event, Johan, who's standing there. He's the project manager, Deborah, and also I want to recognize 2 of the contributors, Ahmed Ali, who's from the Pakistan's Federal Investigation Agency. Raise your hand. Siraj, who has done an excellent piece on Balochistan. And I also want to thank National Defense University, which had allowed me to get 4 Pakistani police officers, host them at NDU as fellows, and to get their support and insights for this report. Thank you. Thank you very much.